All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're building what you might call a vigilant mind, essentially training ourselves to spot flawed reasoning out in the wild. We're drawing our insights from a really fantastic instructional framework all about critical thinking and logical fallacies called The Vigilant Mind, A Guide to Logical Integrity. Look, we live in an era where we are just constantly bombarded by information, random data points, and totally competing narratives. Our brains are forced to process this massive fire hose of input at lightning speed, and because of that intense cognitive load, it is incredibly easy for deceptive logic to just slip right past our mental filters unnoticed.
So the source material asks this kind of fun, fundamental question. Are you ready to be a super reasoner? Now, I know that specific term might sound a little lighthearted, but the idea behind it is dead serious. Think of it as adopting the rigorous, analytical mindset of a master detective. The question really is, are you prepared to fortify your brain against the subtle cognitive biases and deceptive arguments that sneak into our daily conversations? Because that's what this is all about. Consciously upgrading your analytical defenses so you can accurately separate the solid facts from the misleading fiction.
Part 1, Becoming a Super Reasoner. Let's look at our very first logical culprit, hasty generalizations. A hasty generalization is exactly what it sounds like. It's when we jump to a massive conclusion with way, way too little evidence. Look, our brains are literally wired by evolution for efficiency, right? We use these mental shortcuts called heuristics to make quick sense of a really complex world. But that speed comes at a steep price. When we make a huge leap to a judgment using insufficient data, we fall right into a trap. Just imagine making a sweeping assumption about a company's entire financial health based on, like, a single afternoon stock dip, or stereotyping a whole demographic based on one isolated interaction you had. It's a fundamental error in logic. You're substituting a tiny, completely unrepresentative piece of the puzzle for the whole picture. So here's the real contrast, relying on insufficient data versus putting in the actual work to gather substantial evidence. Insufficient data is the hallmark of reactive, flawed reasoning. It is the path of least resistance. Substantial evidence, on the other hand, well, that requires friction. It demands that we slow down, really engage our higher-order critical thinking faculties, and actively seek out a broader context, larger sample sizes, and verifiable facts. A rigorous thinker knows that you just can't form a reliable belief without doing that heavy lifting first. Honestly, it's the defining difference between a knee-jerk reaction and a genuinely well-founded conclusion. Moving on to culprit number 2, the bandwagon effect. Now, if that first fallacy was all about lacking data, the bandwagon effect is driven by a totally different, deeply ingrained psychological mechanism, social proof. This is that intense pressure to just follow the majority instead of actually thinking for yourself. Evolutionarily speaking, human beings found safety in numbers, right? Straying from the herd usually meant physical danger. But today, that survival instinct misfires all the time as a cognitive bias. This fallacy subtly pressures you into going along with the crowd, whispering that, hey, if a huge group of people are doing something or thinking a certain way, it must naturally be correct. Boiling it down, this is the trap of believing something is true literally just because everyone else does. Think about how pervasive this is in modern life. It is the entire engine driving social media algorithms and echo chambers, where going viral somehow equals being true. It's that exact same dynamic in workplace meetings, where everyone nods along with a fundamentally bad idea just because leadership or maybe a few vocal colleagues threw their support behind it first. If the main foundation for your belief is simply how popular it is among other people, well, you're basically outsourcing your logic to the crowd. Section 3. Tools for independent thought. Okay, so how do we actually defeat these ingrained biases? We need actionable strategies. First, to stay vigilant against flawed reasoning, you've got to cultivate the habit of the strategic pause. When you're hit with new, emotionally charged information, just take a conscious breath before you react. Second, to ensure you're always seeking substantial evidence, start asking yourself really specific questions. What's the actual sample size here? Or wait, is there counter evidence I'm deliberately ignoring right now? And finally, to maintain independent thought, practice playing devil's advocate with your own deeply held beliefs. Ask yourself, would I still hold this exact opinion if my closest friends believed the complete opposite? Going through that mental checklist turns passive observation into active, rigorous, critical thinking. Section 4. Watch out for tricky arguments. The big takeaway from the source material is this super empowering directive. Keep thinking for yourself and looking for good reasons. By consciously spotting the trap of those hasty generalizations and actively fighting off the powerful psychological pull of the bandwagon effect, you reclaim control over your own reasoning. You make this essential shift from just being a passive consumer of narratives to being an active, independent evaluator of the truth. It definitely takes consistent effort, but keeping that cognitive independence, it is absolutely always worth the work. So, I'm going to leave you with a bit of a real-world challenge. Where are you going to encounter these deceptive arguments, this tricky talk, today? Seriously, actively scan your environment. Whether you're looking at a targeted ad, scrolling through a highly polarized newsfeed, or even just having a debate with a coworker. Look out for those critical moments where the evidence seems suspiciously thin or the social pressure to conform feels exceptionally high. Protect your independent thought. Demand that substantial proof, and absolutely refuse to jump to conclusions. Until next time, stay vigilant and keep questioning the narrative.